Newcastle draw 1-1 with Bournemouth at the weekend, and it's a quick turnaround as we take on Nottingham Forest tomorrow night with the return of Sandro Tonali. Eddie Howe has been on this morning in his press conference. Newcastle are being linked to another goalkeeper this summer window, so we'll talk about that. And Eddie Howe saying that he thinks we will struggle to bring in a centre-back and a right-winger. Not exactly what you want to hear with 4 days left of the transfer window. Yes, guys, how's it going? Welcome back to a new video on this slightly gloomy, rainy Tuesday morning. And as I say, with 4 days left of the window, I think the weather could well represent the feeling around that, because Eddie Howe this morning has said that basically he doesn't think it's going to happen. He doesn't think we're going to be able to sign a right winger and a striker in the short amount of time we've got left. And that, yeah. Anyway, we'll get into it. Welcome back to Toon Tuesdays, your weekly roundup of Newcastle United news. Plenty to get into, lots going on this week, and we'll kick things off straight away with the draw against Bournemouth. I must say, extremely frustrating watch, that game. Hard to watch, especially the first half. With my black and white glasses on a few days later, you know, a win and a draw from our first 2 games. You know, Bournemouth are a side that you would potentially associate with the lower half of the table, but these days are closer to mid-table. I don't think they will be struggling at the bottom. I just think before going into the game, you read the stats of like a Man City who won 7, because obviously you play every team home and away, so they beat, I think, against the bottom 10 teams. They played every team twice, won 17 out of 20. Arsenal won 16 out of 20. Newcastle won 11. And it's just, that was just something that throughout all of last season, just games where you're going in, like, and then you look at like how many teams Newcastle beat in the top 6, and we were beating them. You know, so that was something that we went to this season, quick off the mark, quick into it. Let's just smash them out of here. And both in the first 2 games, we've just looked a bit slow off the mark, slightly lethargic. I think it basically took us 70 minutes. Well, you could argue with Eddie Howe that it took us 70 minutes to get our first team on the pitch. Because as soon as Barnes came on, as soon as Trippier come on, as soon as Willett come on, we're way better. And maybe that does bring a little bit of optimism for the game against Forest. I would imagine that those players who didn't start last time round will probably start this time round. And I don't think Eddie Howe will make wholesale changes. I think it's still early in the season. You know, it's not like we have to start being... I would suggest we don't have to start being careful with these guys. We don't have Europe. You know, it won't be long until we've got a week break. Fair enough, this week it is 3 games in a week as such, but it's the season just started. So I think there will be some changes. I'd like to see Barnes start. I'd like to see Barnes and Gordon play together all the time. I mean, it was Gordon didn't play great. You know, I think people were calling for Gordon to come off. He stayed on, then he scored. But one player that everyone is excited to see back is the main man, Sandro Tonali. Eddie Howe didn't shy away from discussing him in his press conference this morning, saying that he wants to get him involved pretty much straight away, and I would very much suggest that Tonali will start the game. I don't know that he'll necessarily play the entire match. I think it's a strange one with Tonali, because everyone's excited. We'll play Spurs this weekend. Newcastle have got a very good record against Spurs at home, and I think Tonali playing his first game back in that game will be a huge lift. But having the fixture moved and having him allowed to play Forest makes sense. Play the guy, get him as much game time as possible, get him up to speed as quickly as possible. And I've heard a fair bit of this, you know, people said you can't keep calling him, it's like a new signing, because that's almost letting Newcastle get away with the fact that we haven't brought in enough signings. But I think there's pressure there. I think I would like to say there's not, but I think that if Tonali hits the ground running and plays very well, it could cover some of the cracks that we maybe haven't fixed. We're just, as I say, papering them over with a big Tonali plaster. If Tonali comes in, he's great. You know, it doesn't matter anymore. We're winning and stuff. I think for me, it's not... Yeah, the lack of signings is a problem, but we're still the team that got 4th 2 years ago with pretty much the same team. We're still the team that got 7th last year with Europe. We're still the team that beat PSG. I'm more concerned of how, like, lack of match practice we've had. Like, obviously, Gordon hasn't had a lot of it. Bruno hasn't had a lot of it. We need to get up to speed quick. And I think that's why I'm hoping that when Tonali does come in, he does very much hit the ground running. So if you want to let me know your predictions for the Forest game down in the comments below, or even give your lineups, please do. It's interesting to see what happens with Kelly and Hall. I mean, Kelly playing left back, I don't think that worked either. I think the frustration for me, I mean, as I say, a win and a draw for the first 2 games. You know, against 2, you know, teams that are on the South Coast anyway. You'd think, I'd hope would have done better. But for now, I'll live with it. I think I'm more worried of the performances. Like, we look tired, and we've just started. That isn't the press on the ball, like, run them out of their skin. That was a team who kind of, like, looked laboured for most of the game until, you know, a great cameo to some degree. Barnes coming on and totally lit it up. And hopefully Tonali will do that tomorrow as well. But, as I've mentioned, a player that has been heavily linked with Newcastle very, very recently, again, is Trafford. So remember when Eddie Howe says, well, you think we'll struggle to buy a right winger and a centre-back? Well, goalkeeper hasn't been ruled out. Eddie Howe said in his conference that it's a player that we have been very interested in. Paul Mitchell himself reportedly went and watched Trafford play this weekend. Yeah, I mean, it's just absolute madness. Ruddy was on the bench against Bournemouth. Ruddy, the guy who I assumed wouldn't even get in the squad, would just basically be a coach, was the backup for Dubravka this weekend. Like, it's understood that Vlaco Dimas, learning that name, has been linked to going out on loan this season. And I think if there's any way to show that the transfer of Vlaco Dimas was in fact basically a huge way around PSR, the best way to show that is to loan him out within 2 weeks of buying him. And look, I'm not particularly fussed on that. It's the way it is now, and you know, everybody knows it, and me ranting about it's not really going to change anything. But I hope that at least bringing him in was a player that we were happy to be number 2 to Nick Pope. I said Dubravka before, I got that wrong. So now we've ended up with Nick Pope number 1, and then Dubravka, Vlaco Dimas, Gillespie, and Ruddy. And Newcastle still don't think any 4 of those are capable of being the backup to Nick Pope. So we brought in that Forest second choice goalie, looked at him and gone, well, he's not good enough. So we're back in the market for Trafford again. I spoke about this in a video a couple of weeks ago on the fact that Liverpool have bought Mamadashvili. Newcastle were interested in nothing that ever happened. Now we've ended up in a situation where we've not signed a centre-back, we've not signed a right winger, and we're looking to buy a goalkeeper. And Eddie Howe was questioned on this to the point where he said he was interested in Trafford, and he also said that he believes Newcastle will, he doesn't think it'll happen. He does not think that Newcastle will have time in the next 4 days. Is it 4? I think it's 3 if you don't include today, to sign basically the 2 priority positions we started the transfer window with, in a centre-back and a right winger. The Gahey stuff has gone on way too long. It's been crazy. The reports are also that Newcastle have basically agreed, or I think it's that we have agreed a £70 million fee for Gahey now. And look, if Crystal Palace aren't accepting that, I don't know what. I will understand it to a degree as to why Newcastle have continued this for so long. It was basically down to the fact that Newcastle have put so much time in. You know, a terrible example would be that fantasy football, you put in a striker, hopefully scores next week, hopefully scores next week, hopefully scores next week, and he doesn't score at all. As opposed to going, right, take him out, put Haaland in. Although you probably couldn't because Haaland's so expensive on that game. But the point is, though, is you can sit back and you can hope and hope and hope and hope, and then it never works out. Newcastle have done that all the way through now. And if Newcastle don't, but this is the thing though, it's the as much as they're not getting the player, just the actually getting played, or the embarrassment of it's been so publicly done. Parish could probably go, well, I'll make it 75. And Newcastle will probably pay it because we've followed it so long. I think we had to be way more, had to stand our own ground, be way more confident and like own it way better, rather than being like, oh, well, if we don't get Gahey, we'll get no one. It's like, I think at that point, if the fans would have been understanding that if we backed out. Whereas I think now, actually, with 3 days to go, I don't think we can back out. I think we have to just pay them the money and get the centre-back. And I think that's why Eddie Howe's saying it's not going to be possible to bring a right winger in. If we're paying 70 million for Gahey, I don't think there is the funds there, unless we look to sell players. And I do think there will be movement out this summer window. But I'm actually starting to change my mind, because if Newcastle don't have the time to bring in other players, will we let Trippier go? I don't know. I think we'll have to let a goalie go. Christ on a bike, because they can't even be in the squad. And then look at like a Matt Target. Will he go out? Well, maybe on a loan deal, but that's not really bringing the money in. I think the players that we were hoping to actually move on for money this summer window, you could look at maybe an Almiron, and you could maybe pick up a Trippier, but I don't think Almiron wants to leave, and Newcastle are going to struggle to force him out in the next 3 days. It's fair enough that maybe Trippier will go, but with such little time, I don't think we'll get the money that would actually be enough to get a right winger in. I think the Trafford deal would actually be more likely that Burnley allow us to have him on a small fee and pay them more next summer, because they're probably willing to accept a bid of 30 million for someone who's young and in a club in a relegated position. It leaves us vulnerable by not giving Pope the backup, but if we spend 30 million on Trafford and don't bring a right winger in, I think I will be frustrated. I mean, the only thing that gives me a slight saving grace as well is that we saw Gordon and Barnes play left and right wing last night. I don't know why Eddie Howe doesn't do it. He just doesn't like it. He doesn't like putting Barnes or Gordon on the other side. I thought Gordon wasn't great, full stop. So at least I would play Barnes to at least reward him for his game time. I think I would still rather see Gordon on the right ahead of an Almiron, or, give Murphy his dues, give Murphy his time, but not as the out-and-out start ahead of either of the two other clearly better players. Yeah, disappointing start to this final week of the transfer window. We're going to spend billions on Gahey, have no money for a right winger, and bring in another goalkeeper. Thoughts down in the comments. I think this week it started quiet. Obviously, it was bank holiday. Nothing really happened yesterday. I think this morning started quiet. At least Eddie Howe's saying that he thinks things will be tough. It hasn't exactly been the start to the morning that I wanted. The Gahey was done. Target was on his way out and would already approach the right winger. And judging by the feeling this kind of lunchtime, I don't think things are going to be pushed through very quickly. So I'm hoping that as of tonight, things start to snowball. And then we've got the game tomorrow. We've got the game tomorrow night. Eddie Howe will be at the match. So let's hope Paul Mitchell's got his, I was going to say writing pen out. I don't know. Hopefully he's ready to go. Thanks. I'm still hungover from the weekend. Thank you for watching. I'm still tired anyway. Drop a like, subscribe if you have enjoyed this video. Thoughts on everything discussed in today's Tuesdays, and I'll catch you later.